"I don't know where she is," the father answered without hesitation. His voice stayed calm. His body barely moved. And for a moment, detectives had no reason to challenge him. His 13-year-old daughter had disappeared overnight. There were no signs of forced entry, no screams, no witnesses. It looked like another runaway case. But within days, one tiny digital clue changed everything. A location that should never have appeared. A phone that suddenly stopped moving. And a search history that investigators would later describe as deeply disturbing. By the time detectives uncovered the truth, they weren't searching for a missing child anymore. They were building a murder case against a man who had reported her missing. June 2024, Franklin County, Ohio. At 6:18 a.m., 911 dispatch received a call from Michael Carter, a 41-year-old warehouse supervisor. He sounded worried. He told the operator that his 13-year-old daughter, Emily Carter, was gone. According to Michael, he had just returned home from his overnight shift. Emily's bedroom was empty. Her backpack was missing. The front door was unlocked. "I think she ran away," he said. Officers arrived within minutes. Inside the house, everything looked normal. Emily's phone charger was still plugged into the wall. Her favorite shoes were still inside the closet. There were no broken windows. No obvious signs of a struggle. At first glance, Michael's story seemed believable. Detectives treated the case as a possible runaway, but experienced investigators know something most people don't. Children rarely disappear without leaving a trail, and if the child leaves no trail, sometimes it's because someone else created the story. As the first 48 hours passed, detectives began doing what they do in every missing child investigation. They stopped focusing on what Michael said and started focusing on what the evidence could prove. The first step was simple: reconstruct every minute of his timeline. According to Michael, he had worked the overnight shift from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. He claimed Emily was asleep when he left for work. When he returned home, she was gone. It sounded straightforward, until detectives requested his workplace records. The time card confirmed that Michael had clocked in, but something didn't fit. Security cameras showed him leaving the warehouse shortly after midnight. He didn't return for nearly 2 hours. No supervisor had authorized the absence. When detectives asked where he had gone, Michael shrugged. "I probably went for a drive. Sometimes I clear my head." It wasn't an impossible explanation, but it wasn't one investigators could verify, so they pulled another source of evidence: his cell phone location data. The records showed that Michael had not been driving around the city. Instead, his phone traveled nearly 20 miles outside town to a quiet rural road surrounded by thick woods. The phone remained there for almost 40 minutes. Then it returned to the warehouse. Detectives immediately searched the area. Nothing was found. No clothing, no backpack, no signs of Emily. But one question became impossible to ignore. Why would a father, whose daughter disappeared hours later, secretly drive into the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night? When detectives interviewed Michael again, they didn't mention the phone records. Instead, they asked an ordinary question: "Did you go anywhere after work that night?" Michael answered immediately: "No, I drove straight home." It was the first statement investigators knew was false. From that moment, the case changed. Emily was no longer treated as a likely runaway. Her father became the focus of the investigation. Still, detectives needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence, and that evidence was already waiting inside Michael's own phone. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Michael Carter's phone. At first glance, everything looked ordinary. Text messages, work schedules, family photos, nothing immediately suggested violence. But experienced digital forensic analysts rarely rely on what appears on the screen. Instead, they searched for deleted data. Within hours, several recently deleted internet searches were recovered. The searches had all been made less than 24 hours before Emily was reported missing. One search read, "How long does cell phone location stay active?" Another asked, "Can police recover deleted phone history?" Then investigators found one final search. It stopped everyone in the room. Best places to hide evidence in wooded areas. Michael had deleted the searches, but deleting them wasn't enough. The records were still there. Detectives now believed this was no longer a missing child investigation. It was becoming a homicide investigation. Still, a search history alone would never be enough to prove murder. They needed something physical, something that placed Michael somewhere he shouldn't have been. So detectives expanded the investigation. They collected surveillance footage from nearby businesses, traffic cameras, and gas stations. Most cameras showed nothing unusual until one security camera from a small gas station changed everything. At 1:17 a.m., Michael's vehicle appeared on camera. He wasn't heading toward work. He was driving in the same direction as the remote wooded road identified by his phone records. Even more important, his vehicle returned almost an hour later. This time, it looked different. Investigators noticed what appeared to be fresh mud covering part of the passenger passenger side. Michael had never mentioned making that trip. He had repeatedly told detectives he drove straight to work and then straight home. Now they had evidence proving otherwise. During the next interview, detectives placed a printed photograph from the gas station camera on the table. Michael stared at it for several seconds. He said nothing. Then he quietly replied, "I forgot about that trip." But detectives had heard that phrase before. People rarely forget a 1-hour drive into a remote wooded area in the middle of the night, especially the night before their child disappeared. The investigation was closing in, and detectives were about to search the one place Michael hoped they never would, his vehicle. Detectives obtained a second search warrant. This time, it wasn't for Michael's phone, it was for his vehicle. Forensic specialists photographed every inch of the SUV before collecting evidence. At first, nothing appeared unusual. The interior had been recently cleaned. The carpet smelled strongly of chemical cleaner. The floor mats looked almost new. To most people, it would have looked spotless. But crime scene investigators know that cleaning doesn't always remove evidence. Sometimes, it only hides it. Using alternate light sources and chemical testing, investigators examined the passenger side floor and the rear cargo area. Several faint stains reacted immediately. Samples were collected and sent to the state crime laboratory. Days later, the results came back. The DNA matched Emily Carter. It wasn't enough to determine exactly how she had been injured, but it proved one thing beyond dispute. Emily had bled inside the vehicle. That single discovery completely changed the investigation. Detectives brought Michael in for one final interview. This time, the conversation was different. There were no broad questions, no guessing, only evidence, one piece at a time. They showed him the phone records, the surveillance footage, the deleted searches, and finally, the DNA report. Michael sat silently. He avoided eye contact for nearly a minute. No one in the room spoke. Then a detective quietly asked, "Is there anything you want to tell Emily's family?" Michael lowered his head, but no confession came. He simply repeated the same words he had been saying since the first day. "I didn't do anything." The investigation, however, told a different story. Phone data placed him in a remote wooded area. Security cameras confirmed the trip. Digital forensics uncovered deleted searches. And Emily's DNA was found inside his vehicle. Taken together, investigators believe the evidence formed a clear and compelling picture. Several weeks later, search teams returned to the wooded area identified by Michael's phone records. After an extensive search, they discovered human remains. DNA testing confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The remains belonged to Emily Carter. Michael Carter was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with evidence. He pleaded not guilty, and the case moved toward trial. For Emily's family, no verdict could undo what had happened, but investigators believed they had uncovered the truth. A father who claimed his daughter had simply run away, left behind a trail of digital evidence that told a very different story. Sometimes, the smallest clues, a phone signal, a deleted search, or a single drop of blood can reveal the truth that words never will. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this case analysis, don't forget to subscribe for more crime investigations and interrogation breakdowns. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next case.